All right, hey everyone, this is Namer from our MixoChat series where we basically talk about identity in its absolute sense. I love to introduce you to people who are doing incredible things with their own identity, exploring the cosmos, exploring their own lives. And what these individuals do is they build their life based on what they ideally want to become. And everything seems to fall into place accordingly. Today, I want to introduce you to my good friend Awoken Art. Awoken Art is an artist who does murals and he does paintings, he does psychedelic art, and he does physical art, but a lot of it has to do with in-person experiential type of artistry. Now he goes by Awoken Art. His name is Charlie Charen, but I want to introduce you to him because he's someone that I met throughout my life, just serendipitously speaking. And this is kind of one of those interesting things where he was just a normal customer. I mean, in my day job, I work with like AV technology and I'm a systems designer. But what appealed to me about him was that he was wearing his own logo, and it was like this Eye of Horus type of pyramid triangle type thing. And it did this thing where it made me want to strike up a conversation with him. And suddenly we weren't engaging each other as a customer employee type thing. No, it was like my identity engaging his aspirational identity, which is Awoken Art. So, Charlie, can you just kind of introduce yourself and talk about what you've got going on? And our audience wants to kind of hear basically, they want to know your story, but they also want to hear how they can also build their life in alignment with their own identity, in alignment with their aspirational identity. So, just welcome to the show and just kind of talk about who you are.
Absolutely. And I want to extend my gratitude, Umair, for having me on here. It's been a long time coming. Despite all of what's happening out in this crazy world, I find solace knowing that we can still connect or we can still utilize technology in a positive way and impact the culture and in the community. And I look forward to having my community, look into your community and us merge together. And we're going to have an amazing conversation. I look to really shift some paradigms and shift some perspectives. A little bit about me. I've been an artist ever since I was put on this earth. And it's been one of those things where you would typically expect someone who's been doing art ever since I was a little kid to embrace it, but it's always been sort of like a fight. I really didn't accept the art and my identity, as you call it, until about I had a near death experience about 7 years ago, and that's where the awoken comes from. I was actually I had sustained a huge femur fracture. I was unable to work. I was unable to walk for around 3 months. And the only thing I was able to do to really try to generate some income was doing, spray art. I had really kind of embraced different types of art that I was, just experimenting with and really kind of in tune. When you have such a real traumatic experience like that, that can really test, where your road's gonna go, and you can take different paths. And I want to test all of that, to a higher power source, and being able to believe in myself so much to overcome that. That's important. That is a paradigm shift. Okay. And that's what people call that awakening process, and it comes in many forms. It doesn't have to be a car accident. It could be something that's, just typically it's traumatic, and it's either going to be on whatever scale, and that's going to be dependent on what your timeline is, what your life path is, and what decisions you made when you were, young, what things you have to grow. It's all part of the growth process, right? So with that, with embracing that, with such a painful, traumatic thing, I was able to go through what I like to call a terror barrier, and some people call them fear barriers, but they're known typically for as like terror barriers. And Bob Proctor is the one that keys that phrase and coins that phrase. And basically, it's when you go through a predicament or any sort of situation that tests everything. When you come out of that, if you have the same integrity and that same passion, that drive for what throttled that momentum through that traumatic experience, what you're ended up with is, sort of like, it may not be pretty, it may not be money, it may be a skill, it may be like a honed thing. So for me personally, it was Awoken Art. It was just, taking what I already was born with and the skills that I didn't embrace due to, stereotypical negative stories and negative paradigms, constructs that, are driven by, media and, sort of the broke artist thing, or, you'll get rich when you die sort of thing. Those sort of things kind of brand you. It's hard to bust through those, right? So there's a lot of things an artist got to do. But being able to take that and go through it and say, okay, this is what I was put on this earth to do. I'm going to take a risk, because you know what? I was taking a risk, and I almost, it was almost the end, right? Like, for me, it was very traumatic, near death accident. Some people, it might be just like you separating from someone that was toxic relationship, toxic job. If you're, stuck at your job and you're every day you're waking up like, gosh, really, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. I don't feel, this is not like what I feel. It could be those decisions where you test it and you break through that. And once you break through that, then you'll be able to, accomplish your goals, and you'll be able to, for me, I was able to transcend my art to a different level and connect with a lot of people.
It's incredible. So you had this like life altering accident 7 years ago, and that put things into perspective for you. It's like it made you realize that maybe you weren't pursuing your path as much as you should have. And out of that was born Awoken Art. What was your life leading up into the accident, and why did that accident change your perspective? You said that you were an artist since you were born, basically, since you were very young. Were you not pursuing art leading up into the accident, and the accident make you realize that you have to pursue art? Like, what was that thought process like?
It was just basically, for me, it was what was readily there. I was in a very dark place, having all those, things taken for granted, like walking and working, having such a prideful, I've always been prideful. I've always been engaged in a project, and I've always been improving myself. So, you know, it's been just, um, working through, those, instances in life where I just have to, um, you just kind of like look around, really. And for me, I had paint, I had sketchbooks, I had things. So I just did it. I didn't think about it because I already knew back when I was younger, this was something that made me happy. So I went with that. So then I started doing that, going down the path that made me happy. And then that was like a landslide. And then you go through difficulties, you go and you hone in. I had nothing better to do, right? Because I had to stay there for around 2 months, this planet. So for me, that's just like a very blatant universe saying, stay here, stay put, and then we're going to provide you with all these supplies, which I was able to, a lot of people, friends, like they saw started doing art. So they would give me like, canvases. They would like, because they knew what I went through. And, I had a very supportive network always. So, having a very supportive network is key to, whether it be family or whether it be friends. So,
Okay, so you went through this terror barrier, and somehow your life was transformed. You came out of from the other side, and art seemed to grasp at you. It became a vehicle for your own self expression. You kind of just went all in. You talk about this whole thing about just taking risks. Why was art such a risk for you? Why did you? Because that's a powerful word. I mean, I can sit here, I can draw. I don't see drawing as risky, but in your case, it became risky. Why was it such a risk for you to make that decision to become an artist?
I mean, you're talking like providing, and
I just mean in general, because you mentioned, so
well, that's the risk. I'm saying provide, survival, right? I mean, and that's
Oh,
That's
okay.
that's some of the paradigms that you go through, where like the biggest thing is honestly taking what your parents told you. And that's why it's important if you have very supportive parents. My parents are very supportive. They always have been. But with that, they've always been, conscious of the economy and conscious of, what was going on. And I had always had a great work ethic. But when that happened, all my income was gone, right? Because I couldn't work. So how I sustained was by selling the art. And when they saw that the art, there was, it kind of falls in line when it's right, And there was like, times where it like, money was tight, but it was like never, it was never about that, because to me, I had so much pride. The income that I went from was like, from here to there. So it's like, it wasn't ever about that. It was me making the best out of that moment, right? And believing. I actually didn't realize what I had until about 2 to 3 years later. So it was just me doing my art, and it was called. It was just like, I had it in my head. So people that are out there that are like, oh, like I've been thinking about a business or a brand for around 2, 3 years, and it's been in my head. That was kind of me for like, wondering, am I going to go in all the way? And it just happened, because I ended up being in an environment that was cohesive with that. And then it took me on my journey. And I was blessed to have that sort of, certain instances where, I had that environment, but I'm going to be 100%. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I could be in a forest. I'm going to figure out how to take nature and create art. It is a way built into my DNA. So my way of, I always look at it as like your passion is what you do when you're bored. Whatever you can do for like 8 hours straight, and sustain interest, probably your passion, should probably look into that.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because we're always future focused. Like when I get this X, Y, Z, then I'll be happy. And it's good to have goals, but at the same time, you gotta find something that you can just lose yourself in
Right.
for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. And I also love the way that you put it, where it was a thought inside your mind for even after the accident. It was like a good 2 or 3 years as you were processing all of this information before you really decided to take the plunge. And I imagine that during this time you're crafting this identity. So who is Awoken Art?
That's a great question, there. And a lot of people, actually, I keep my identity as far as like social media and as far as public, kind of like on a low end spectrum, because I really believe that Awoken Art is everyone who is a part of this tribe that can connect with the idea that I, you know, having that growth, spiritual growth, and wanting to see human consciousness evolve as a whole. And in my perspective, my passion being art, I'm using that and will continue to use that as the basis, right? And the ethos for my community, which is just a tribe, right? And being able to connect with people on a grand scale for a purpose of just getting their friends, family, and anyone who they know more spiritually aligned, more conscious about energy and about um, earth, and really tuning in to a more quantum perspective. Um, and it doesn't have to really, not really religious or how political. It's really being in tune with yourself and aligning with the vibration that makes you feel good, right? Because that's really what it comes down to, the electricity and being in a great space mentally, physically, and it's only makes sense that if you find people that are, this, I believe this, my body is a temple. So, who I let in my temple, and, what I do in my temple and how I represent my temple is important. So if you find other people that, kind of has the same temple or the ideals, maybe there's people that you wouldn't mind them coming inside of your temple and, sort of embracing that energy of, um, building, empowering each other, looking at knowledge as a gift, and being able to give it and embrace it.
I think that's super important because as you start to transform your identity and you're no longer the person you were when you were 2, 3, 4 going through grade school and high school and all that, once you finally found like an identity that you want to champion, you want other people to also be involved in that journey with you. And so what I see is that Awoken Art isn't just you as a singularity, it's also a movement that you've created that other people also want to be involved with, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So it's to say it's a movement, more so like a way of life, it's just kind of that, being aware and having a more heightened awareness and embracing that. So, and instead of, you know, promoting something that may be negative or may not be, as like, some brands now, the substance and the true, the what they stand for. There's a lot of mixes out there, and I just always want to be, something that just makes people feel good, and the art and having it be inside of people's houses, businesses, and that really kind of sets the bar at a certain level for me to deliver a consistent experience. And so that's what I try to do. I always try to provide a consistent experience, whether it be through my apparel, or whether it be through my art, or whether it be through my branding. So it's just something that I want to consistently provide for.
No, I totally hear you. I mean, what's really important about this is that you've created this entire movement based off your identity. You're making money off, which is also awesome. You started selling your art, which is incredible. You took this leap, and it's fascinating because a lot of people out there they want to be where you are. You've got this whole myth of like the starving artist, and I think one of the first things I was fascinated with when I first met you was the whole idea that like you're actually doing this full time. Like you don't have a side job. I mean, you don't have a full time. This is your full time job. You took the whole plunge into it. It took you a while before you can actually make this like a full time thing, but now you actually people hire you to do murals and you actually do a lot of public art. You do paintings as well. I see stuff that you're posting on Instagram that you're trying to sell. It's really, really cool. Uh, how exactly do you go about finding these commissions, or how do you go about? I know you did a shoe store just recently, right? It was like a sports apparel store, and you
Yeah.
did like the whole Space Jam mural. It looks beautiful. I remember the entire story. So I think like you're really humble the way you talk about your journey, but you're doing some pretty big things over here. How exactly does someone actually go about this and actually become someone who gets commissioned to do art? How do you make your living off of being an artist?
So I believe there's in any service, in any business, in anything that you do, if you're good at it, you can make money. There's money to be made. And you got to figure out what it takes. And what I suggest is for someone to think backwards. So if you are an artist and you want to do murals, then think about it. Where do you think you would want to look at your mural, right? Where do you think your mural fits? You may have a specialty. You may be like better at doing animals, maybe, or there might be scenes, landscapes. It may be more cartoons. You have to find and you have to think about it. So then you get a game plan, right? So you have to set up a sort of like a playbook, and then once you set that up, you go backwards. So you're there, right? So you really envision and you really embody that process of being there. You go and the mural's there. You think backwards. Well, how did that happen, right? So how did you get inside there? So then you write that down. You write down these questions. How did you get inside? You know, the business that you did the mural at. How big was it, right? Like, look at it. Was it? You really got to envision this, especially with the idea of thinking in a simulated perspective. If you are putting out what your intentions are, then it'll manifest somehow, some way. So you have to, have the belief. And so once you're already in that belief, then once you're doing this, it's almost like you're just preparing and setting yourself up mentally. And then you write down the cost of the materials. You go through the, if you need help, if you need a ladder, you go through everything. What is it? Then now you already think. You see, it's almost done. And now you're like, okay, so what is it? Then you start sketching it out. Maybe you can sketch something out. So now you already have a sketch. Okay, so you got a sketch of a mural. You have an idea about the place that you want to go. So then you put action to it, right? So you put action to that, and you go out and you execute, right? And if you can't execute, that's where a lot of people, I feel like they just, it's like, I want to, but then there's so many excuses. Listen, there's no excuse. It's working backwards and executing, and it'll happen. So you're there in your car, right? Or maybe, before you go in your car, you're looking at the places. Google, ask Siri, you know what I mean? Ask Alexa. Just figure out where these places are. Write down the addresses. Give those places a call. I actually, if you're really good with people and talking and you're charismatic, I know COVID right now is like, I would suggest a call. Ask when the owner is in, or when the person who is in charge of, with marketing, or the person who's in charge. Usually you would ask for the owner. So then figure out that date, try to connect. And this is where, you kind of have to pursue that. It may not happen the first call, the second call, but what I like to do is I like to fully submerge, especially write down about, 100 businesses that you'd want to get involved with. Write them down, follow them on Instagram, get to know them. You know what I mean? It's very easy right now for you to kind of assimilate and get to know your potential customer and potential client. And I think that's very important. So, once you go through those channels, you'll kind of identify. You may be like, what, on second thought, I don't think that, this really resonates. I don't, and you'll actually start to, and I guarantee you, which what happens to me, either someone down the line sees it and then they connect with you, or you reach out to someone and it may be like the 10th business or whatever, the 20th business, but then it actually something manifests, and then what do you know? You're there. And remember, if you game plan this appropriately and you went worked yourself backwards, right? I know it sounds like haphazard, but it really is a solid way, because there's really nothing to lose. It's just you strategizing, because at the end of the day, when you're embarking in something that you really have no true clue, you may have done some research, but as far as you getting the deal done, obviously it's something that may not be, fresh in your memory, or something that you've done at all. So there's a risk aspect to that. And so, but remember, when you have your belief and you've already gone through that terror barrier, there's nothing to fear, right? So you're just going in, with the expectation that you're bound and you're destined for greatness. Because
I think what you're saying is phenomenal. And the thing that you've been through this journey, and it's like, what I found is, for a lot of people who go through a similar journey, who are doing what you're doing, it's like, it just makes sense, right? Like, why wouldn't I plan out my journey? Why wouldn't I contact 100 people? Why wouldn't I make a list? What's interesting though is, like, I want to share. What's interesting about what you're saying is that things tend to happen, right? And in ways that you can't even imagine, but it's because you imagined it. Now, here's the thing, right? I'm like a self-proclaimed scientist. Like, I don't like to talk about spiritual woo woo type of stuff. I don't like to talk about like dragons and unicorns and things of that nature. But one thing I will say is, though, in my life, I've had these subjective experiences that have brought me to awe. It's like, oh my God, like what is happening here? Like I thought about this, and because I've been thinking about it, I start to see patterns externally that align with what I'm thinking. And this is kind of like what you're talking about. See, there's this book that I'm reading, and I strongly recommend that you read it as well. I forget his last name. Let me just take a look. His name is Michael. It's Have you ever heard of the surrender experience experiment? Michael Singer.
No, no, no.
All right, so this guy, Michael Singer, I mean, he's made lots of money, has businesses. He wrote this other book. I'm not even going to get into it, but the surrender experiment is all about the whole idea of surrendering to whatever's happening in front of you. It's not about giving up, it's not about quitting. It's about whatever your dream is, whatever your goal is, you just let yourself become fully present to the moment. Stop trying to figure out everything about how it's going to work itself out. If you face some sort of a rejection in the moment as you're going about your journey, don't put too much thought into it, because what's really happening is that a chain of events is taking place that in the background is actually making it so that you are getting closer to what you want. You might not see it in the moment, but that's why it's so important for you to pursue something that you truly love and believe in, because it's not going to happen overnight. But in this whole act of surrender, it's like, all right, let me just be in this moment. Let me just say yes. You know what? My car got a flat tire. Let me just say yes to the moment. Let me smile my way through it. You know what? I didn't get the job that I applied for. Let me just say yes and embrace this moment, because when you resist what's happening, you're not in congruence with reality. And so it's very much to the fact that you have to know what you want, even if you don't have the full picture of what it is that you want, even if you don't fully know, you kind of know where you want to go. You know what the next step is that you want to take. So you just make a declaration that that's what you want to do. So 7 years ago, you probably, I mean, there's no way in hell you could have ever imagined that you would be where you are now, let alone being on this Mixo chat with me. And even when you and I met, we talked about how, look, we got to stay in contact, we got to stay in touch. And you would message me every now and then, I'd message you back, but it was
Yeah.
never the right time for us to have a conversation until now this Mixer chat thing emerges. And what's interesting is that when I had reached out to you, I think you reached out to me and you wanted to be on this conversation on this Mixer chat. And I spoke to you about how, look, well, when can you come up to Delaware? And you said, well, you know, it's kind of hard. I might need to get like a mural commission for me to go up there. It just so turned out that the person I was supposed to have a conversation with, you couldn't make it. And so there was a window that opened up for you. And so
Mm.
now we're here, right? And so
Right.
it's kind of like realizing that even when these shifts happen, that you don't get like too frustrated. So my one friend who was supposed to be in the Mixer chat, it just happened to be that one of the people at his office was on vacation this week. So he and I rescheduled. So it's cool. But like
Right.
you got to be open to these fluctuations. You got to realize that your life is happening for you. And even if you can't really figure out how everything's connecting, just kind of be present, be in the moment, love the journey, and just know that if you've got this vision, everything in the universe in your brain is trying to support that. The way I like to relate that psychologically speaking is that through what scientists call your reticular activation system, your mind starts to see the things that you're focusing on anyway. So if you're focusing on success and you're focusing on art and creativity, then as you go about your waking life, you're going to start to see patterns that resonate with that. And that's why it's so important for you to be congruent. And let's say you're on your journey and you're focusing on art and abundance and love, and you're focusing on creating things that matter to you that other people will also love. But you come across this one instance where it doesn't seem to align. Like, oh, this person said that they're going to hire me for a commission, but they ended up backing out the last second. Okay, well, you don't know what that what that one instance could be in the greater cosmos of your life, in the greater framework. That one instance could lead to a chain reaction later on where it's actually better. Maybe it's better that you didn't get that commission right then and there because it led to something bigger. And that's kind of like the thought process that you need to have. Thick skin. You really have like thick skin when you're going through this. And as long as you love what you're doing, then things seem to kind of fall into place. And I have a feeling based on what you're talking about that as long as you keep pursuing a future self that's bigger than where you are presently, then your art is going to continue to expand. And I kind of feel like this conversation that we're happening might be a springboard into that future. But you've said a lot there. The reason why I'm responding in kind is because I'm letting you know I hear everything you say. I'm taking notes, literally. Like that's why you might see me look away for a second. That's because I'm looking down, taking notes. And it's just, you said it yourself, you pursue it. And it might not happen the first call or the second call, but you got to have the tenacity to keep on going. And I feel that this is something that you naturally seem to have. Like, were you always this tenacious? Were you always this daring?
I live
Were
by.
you, was that?
I'm sorry, but I live by a statement. So it's like a personal, mantra sort of thing. I just kind of I think about from time to time when things get rough and when things get great. It's a humbler. I stay humble. That's my biggest thing. I have a huge heart, right? I'm very in tune with my heart. I focus on my heart. I take elevator trips. I suggest everybody, at any given point of the day, stop where you're at and just close your eyes, and then envision that you're in an elevator and just take a trip down into your heart and stay focused there. Your heart is a muscle that is taken for granted more than anything, more than air. And it's always great to humble yourself and thank, really kind of focus and take time to think about, what is fuel in that pump. And that's one thing that I do that always puts perspective in good, positive alignment. Another thing that I also do is I live by a statement where I say the best version of you, like the highest evolved, best version of you is laughing at you right now. And with that sort of perspective, it kind of says, okay, so it's not someone else laughing at you. It's you laughing at yourself. So what it is I envision where I want to be. Where's the highest point? And it's not really like it's not really like a physical, I'm so in tune with
Hold on,
this
wait. Sorry, is it laughing at you in mockery, or is it laughing at you in like? Why is it laughing at you? Is it making fun of you, or?
So in me, I could probably say that, what's your goal, right? Everybody has like, what's that goal? What is something that if you put inside of your machine, right? That fuel, that hunger. For me, it's, me not living up to my potential, right? I have a lot of energy and a lot of passion vested with the vision and the idea that I'm going to be living a sovereign life, right? And having such a connected love with my family. So for me, it's maybe a perspective of a lack, right, of a identity of a you could do better, right? So almost like a scoff, I would say it's closer. I wouldn't say really like laughing and bully, more so like a scoff, right? Like if you only knew, you know what I mean? So sort of saying,
Okay, so your future self is a better version of your present self.
yeah,
And so what you're saying is when you're caught up in a rut, you just kind of look at your future self looking down and you're saying, "Oh, come on. You're going through that little thing. You'll get over it." That's kind of
exactly. Right. Like, come on, like, even if it's successful, right? So even if something that really successful happens, a great way to humble yourself is your future self saying, well, that's a great success, but there's way better. I can't wait till you see the next, wait till you see the next, wait till you see the big one, right? These are just positive, reinforcing affirmations that you can tell yourself, right? That help me in any in a peril. Usually it's in where there's like, I'm pushing it, maybe there's situations that I'm going through that are anomalies. and just the hurdles of life, you know. So it's more so sort of that the what you think about, what's going on in your mind while you're running the race, sort of, so to speak, you know. And some people keep a clear clarity mind, and I typically do. It's sound and clear and focused. Um, but I'm human, right? So I'm going to have I'm not going to be perfect, and in those imperfect moments where it seems like it's hard, right? This is kind of hard. I'm kind of pushing it, right? I go and I think like, well, okay, but the future self of me, if he was looking back, it's gonna be great. I'm gonna be fine.
Dude, that's such a powerful, like, I'm just blown away because this perspective that you have, I is this something like did the car accident trigger all these like thoughts? Like, because like this is the type of stuff, but I really need you to understand this. Like when people have these peak experiences in their life, when they've like hit like the top. Like I was reading this one book by Ben Hardy, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, called Personality Isn't Permanent. It's phenomenal. It's actually in my backpack right now. I'm going to show the world. I mean, this thing, I've marked this up. I've like taken tons of notes. I mean, you can see the orange highlighter across here. But this whole idea behind this book is that your personality isn't permanent. Who you are day one isn't the person that you're going to be day 100, hopefully. I mean, and the thing that he says is that one of the worst things that can happen to you is that you do achieve the success that you always wanted if you don't reframe yourself. But here's why. He talks about Buzz Aldrin in his book. And once Buzz Aldrin actually had went to the moon, he was literally like he had accomplished his life's goal. Everything moment was for him. It was for him to reach the moon. But once he got back down to earth, he fell into this major spiral of depression because he had achieved what he wanted, and now there was nothing more for him to achieve. He became an alcoholic. His girlfriend left him. Like he just became depressed for many, many years. And what's profound about what you just said was that you took it from a stance of humility, like, oh, well, no matter how successful I become, I like to think that there's always more. And I love that approach as well because, like, look, my future self is so fucking badass. My future self has got it made. But
Yeah.
once I catch up, then my future self is still 10 years further. Matthew McConaughey said this in his Academy Awards acceptance speech a couple of years ago. And, like, did you hear the speech?
I do think it is. I would love to refresh it.
So basically, I mean, I'm paraphrasing like crazy here, but he says, someone wants to ask me, so what do you want to be? Like who's your hero? And he goes, well, my hero is me 10 years from now. And he was 15 at the time. And so once he became 25, the same person goes up to him and asks him, so are you your hero now? He goes, me? No, like my hero is 10 years further out down the road. So every 10 years, his heroes 10 years further down the road. And that's a great way to kind of just grow yourself constantly because you can't just say you've made it, right? And so I say all of that to say, listen, like even in the little things that you say, that you're just kind of saying them all with humility, there's a lot of wisdom there. And so the fact that you just keep pushing your future self off into the future, that you keep saying that there's more. What I'm curious about is where did this perspective come from? Was it literally just I say car accident? Was it a car accident?
I don't think it was. I think this is where it's just who I am. I've always been very it's just like when it's this kind of like sculpting. When you're a kid, I was very just a very blessed to be exposed to have such a good loving family. And my parents, we really didn't start with much, but I think having a strong two parents and seeing them grow from living in North Philadelphia and then growing into the suburbs and putting me first and being able to kind of nurture that in a good way, even though in these schools and in these experiences for me, I was, the story that I used to tell told of a negative, narrative. I don't even like to call that type of story, to be honest with you. I like to look at the positives and say that I overcame what I feel a lot of people were going through. And for people, some people, they just deal with, school and switching schools, and the whole schooling experience is kind of horrible to begin with, right? So it's not really, it's just like, kind of like thrown out in the ocean sometimes without the proper, you know, guidance. It could still just be ill effective no matter what school you go to. Dealing with, every type of environment, whether it comes from, being bullied or, not having access to all of what other kids have, perhaps, or not being able to stick with the trends and these sort of things that are, illusions at the time, right? But they dominate that space and time in that environment of school, so to speak. So it's really important when you're in that time frame, right? But for me, I never was hooked into that. I always was doodling. I always was doing art. Every single school, I always did art. Always was doing art, doing computer art. I didn't care about social, because I was just, I was so focused, like always from a kid. So that's why I look at myself as maybe, I don't know, genetically, I don't know, I'm predisposed. Maybe, I have some different, chemical that makes me just throttle that way, because I can tell you there's a lot of other things, if you look at it entirety, there's a lot of things that are missing, the sociability I had to overcome, but I've overcome these things, but it took a lot. I can't stand here, sit here and tell someone like, oh, just go out if they're introverted. It's really hard. Like, it's going to be really, really hard. But think about it. Like, what do you want to tell your kids? I always say there's another thing I live by, like, okay, so it's 2 minutes, 2 minute flashback before you go, before it's lights out. Will people reflect on who you are, and will they accurately get who you want to aspire to be, that higher version of yourself? Because there's nothing that's stopping you from achieving that except yourself at all times, and that's where it's important to kind of, assess, where do you want to be? That's why 10 years is great. Where do you want to be?
That's incredible. I mean, like, so you had a positive upbringing, and I think that definitely helps out a lot. It helps out a lot in terms of someone who's looking to self-explore. Now, we can't always, I can't influence my upbringing. You can't influence yours. But one thing that you said was profound was that you did have negative experiences through your life as well, but you don't like to look at those negative experiences. You actually look at your back, you look at your past, and you reframe those experiences as positive. And that's another thing that Ben talks about in his book as well. Like, he says that the past changes as you look at it. And it's not like the content doesn't change, but your perspective, your
Right.
version of the story changes as you look at it through a different lens. And I think that's very powerful, because your past has so many different variations of how it can be expressed. But ultimately speaking, I mean, you had a loving family, but you found a way to break out of your introversion, become more extroverted. And that's because your thing is, your 2 minute flashback is, if you only had two, if people, let's say you died right now, and how would people remember you? And would they remember you as this like present stated person that's stuck in his present state who hasn't accomplished anything? Or would they realize and express who you are as you would be in your most realized potential, right? And that's
Right.
how you want to be. You want people to speak of you in terms of who you could ultimately become. You want to see them, you want them to speak to you in terms of a future potential. And the only way you can do that is if you're living your journey, you're sharing your goals with them, you let them know who you are, what you aspire to be, and you keep speaking from the perspective of who you would ultimately become. You speak in that way. So it's not like one day I will become an artist. No, I am Awoken Art. I am an artist. I paint murals. And that's your identity. That's how you want people to perceive you. So, I mean, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I just want to ask, like, how can people find you? How can they find your art? How can they hire you to do commissions? Like, how can they get in contact with Awoken Art?
So the best thing I think for someone to do is just connect with me. Professionally, I'm on LinkedIn. You can look me up. And then also Instagram at Awoken Art. Exactly what's on the shirt here. I also have a brand called Awoken Apparel. And I have a lot of brands that are spawning. I'm working on a lot of different streams of income, which includes different brands, including like over 50 clients that I help service in the Central Florida area, as well as all around the country. I do have other clients that are in different countries and that I do remote work for. But primarily here in Florida is where I do a lot of my local business. But really, I want this brand to be just like I said, sort of like a phenomenon and an awakening for people to just be able to just go and spread with positive affirmations and positive intentions, and join me on my journey as I evolve this brand and bring it to the world. Um, and it's also great to check out my website www.awokenart.com. And you can also reach me by email, awokenart at gmail.com. And, send me a DM. I'm very communicative. Numair knows I have a small team and I'm growing. So, if you are looking to rebrand, if you're looking to kind of take what I was saying, and I do a lot of coaching and I do a lot of one-on-ones as well with people on how they can strategize and how they can, tune in and tap in and take some of the things I was saying and bring their brands to the next level and take their passions to the next level. And I found great success with that. So always good to reach out.
Great. All right, man. Thank you so much for being on this show. Thanks, Charlie.
I appreciate it. I'm super grateful for you, and I wish nothing but blessings and abundance to everything that you're doing and to all of your community. Taking the time to watch this, I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking and reaching out to you and seeing what's next.
Absolutely. All right. This is Awoken Art, everyone, and thanks for listening. All right, we'll be in touch. Take care. Have a great one.